Yeah. Okay. Just to start, that you mentioned, I'm Councillor Dhiren Basu. I'm the chair of this committee, and I request my other colleagues, other councillors, please go ahead.
I'm Julie Davis. I'm Cabinet Member for Employment, Skills and Corporate Resources.
Yeah. Charles.
Okay, I'm Charles Aje, Councillor for Whiteside Lane.
I'm Paul Dennison, Councillor for Highgate.
Yeah. And okay.
Yeah, hello, I'm Fiona Ray, Acting Committees Manager.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jack Booth, Principal Committee Coordinator.
Yes. Yeah, we got the apology from Councillor Bull. Yeah. Any other other business? Any other? No. Declaration of interest? No.
Okay.
No.
No.
No. Thank you.
Union rep, I'm part of it.
Thank you.
Sorry, was that a declaration of interest? I think we just missed that.
I just said it's the usual, I'm a union rep, work for London Fire Brigade and GNU branch rep, not that it's.
That's good. Thank you very much.
That's okay. No.
Nothing for me.
Thank you. Then minutes, as members have comments on the news. Did you go through it? Minutes, is okay?
Which one are you talking about?
20 minutes.
In December 2nd.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Correct. All right. Yeah, very good. Then item 7, parental leave, organizational change, and one of those policies. Can I now invite officers to introduce the report? Yeah. Dan, can you introduce?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. So this is obviously the last meeting of this municipal year and this administration, and it's the point where officers try to complete the policy programme that we committed to for this municipal year and indeed the remainder of this administration. And so the reports that are presented to you today do in fact do that. There are 3 policies appended to this report. There's the parental leave report, there's the organisational change report, and there is the menopause at work policy. Now, all of these 3 items were on the policy forward plan to be completed this municipal year. And the policies presented to you this evening do just that. The previous meeting, you discussed the organisational change policy and you discussed the parental leave policy and agreed the substantive changes to these policies. Following your discussions at the last meeting, we have engaged with trade unions and network groups as appropriate to produce the final wording of these policies, which my team and I are pleased to present to you this evening. You shouldn't see any surprises in these reports as they do reflect the previous discussions at these committee meetings, and we have, as I say, engaged and agreed these with trade unions and network groups as appropriate. So I'm happy to take any questions. I'd suggest questions on a policy by policy basis if anybody has any questions, but these are presented this evening for your approval. Thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah. Have you got any questions?
No questions, Chair. Just to comment that these policies are welcome.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work going on family-friendly policies generally. The parental leave package has been improved, and to some extent, some anomalies have been ironed out. I think we hope to go on with further policies that support our own staff, and make sure that we're on the road to becoming an excellent employer.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, please.
Dan, I have a few questions, if that's okay. Just on page 10, talking about the fact that we're not complying with current legislation, are there any risks associated with not having a policy between now and when it's implemented? And also, how does the policy continue to be compliant? Is it regularly reviewed? If there's a change in legislation that we need to catch up with, what's the process there? On page 11, just on the full pay protection for 18 months for those being potentially offered an alternative job but one grade lower, is that in line with kind of other local authorities? Is that where that's been benchmarked?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll just pick up both of those. On page 10, if there are legislative changes, then obviously legislation overrides the council's policy. So any sort of legislative change will be implemented immediately and will be reported back to the committee for our policy to be changed. But as legislation changes, we will amend our policies as appropriate. If we need to do so in between committee meetings, we will. Normally, we receive indications in advance of legislation changes, and so we'd be able to talk to the committee before those legislation changes were in fact made. On page 11, on the 18 months pay protection, this discussion was had in reasonable detail at the last meeting. 18 months is about average. It's slightly above average. The median's about 15 months, so it is in line with other local authorities. Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
If I can add to that, our employees have been able in Haringey to refuse a suitable alternative offer of employment, even if it's one grade higher.
Okay.
And they have been able to choose to be made redundant instead, which is quite costly and it leads to a lot of churn. And, you know, frankly, we'd rather keep employees than get rid of them. We don't want to be a council that makes people redundant.
Yeah.
So we close that loophole, and that's why salary safeguarding has been put in as a way of incentivising redeployment and trying to manage the process rather than all the time throwing money at it.
Yeah, I just want to add to that we did discuss this at length, and this is part of the improvement that this committee asked officers to add to the policy. So yeah, it's welcome. In fact, thanks for the question. In fact, that it's refreshing the committee's actions as it were.
Just on the other thing I wanted to add is that for some time, although it's been possible in a lot of organisations for there to be 2 weeks of nominated carers leave, paternity leave as it was, we've for some reason been stuck at 1 week of full pay and 1 week of statutory basic. So that's been sorted out, and there are various, I think there are improvements to the adoption package, improvements to nominated carers leave, parental leave of one kind or another. And I think we're looking very closely at the possibility of moving on to improve maternity leave in council if we possibly can.
Yeah. Okay. No. Now, here, item 8. New items about any new items? Yeah.
No items of new urgent business. For the last item, can we just formally check that everybody's happy to approve the 3 separate policies as they are?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, agreed.
Yes.
Chair, could we ask Dan to report on the consultant policy as it currently is in practice?
Hello? Did you hear?
Yeah, no problem, Chair. As members may recall, I think it was the meeting before last, there was quite a substantial discussion held about the council's use of consultants and the consultants policy and whether this policy was being followed. And what I can report to the committee is that having looked at the consultants policy, it is so out of date as to render it unusable. So what I would recommend is that the committee agree to discontinue the use of that policy, because there is another piece of guidance which has been in effect since last summer, which covers all of our arrangements for agency, interims and consultant staff, which is available to officers and is up to date and in line with the finance and contract rules, which the current use of consultants policy is not. And having compared the consultants policy to this new guidance, I can confirm that all the salient points from the consultants policy are in fact covered in this new guidance, which is up to date and details how officers should go about arranging interim and consultant staff to join the organisation. And as the committee will recall, I think the cabinet member reported 2 committees ago that we would introduce a new metric to be reported to the committee of interim and agency staff where the cost to the council was above £500 per year. I do have that data. That number is currently 64. I believe 4 have since less, so it's around 60. But the data I have in my hand is 64, and that is the number of non-permanent employees. Sorry, employees is the wrong word. Non-permanent workers who are currently engaged by the council, where the cost to the council is £500 or more. I would caution against direct comparisons with the cost of a permanent employee, because it should be remembered that these staff pay their own national insurance contributions, employer and employee, don't have access to a pension scheme, don't have access to paid sick, and don't have security of employment, and all of these other things. So that a direct comparison between one and the other, I will caution against. But we did agree to report that metric, and that is the metric. Thank you very much, Chair.
Except, Dan, I think you'll find it's £500 a day rather than £500 a year.
Oh, sorry, my mistake. Did I misspeak? Yes, sorry. £500 a day. £500 a year would indeed be extremely good value.
Chair, can I just come in there? Thanks for the update. There's clearly a difference between guidance and policy. So we just need to be clear. When you say guidance, it's like, well, okay, you can follow this. So, but the idea would be a policy in place. Why I don't necessarily want to be prescriptive, but officers in other places have said, well, it's a guidance. Like, you know, but if there's a policy, yes, fine. So let's start the difference between guidance and policy. When did this guidance? When was it issued to officers? That, and could it be circulated to members of this committee? Has it already? Because I haven't seen it. And I started with the guidance policy difference. How is it going to be not necessarily policed, as it were, but monitored? You know, because it's a very important aspect of it. Yeah, because not many people would necessarily just report it to say I've spent this and spent that. Good practice elsewhere on a monthly basis. There is a grid that is provided to the trade unions in terms of length of time that agency staff or consultants at various levels are being posted. I'm sure you have that, and the spend. So with a view to having a permanent recruitment in place, if it's not for excess workload, for example, if it's a vacancy. I know that's quite a number of things, but I'll stop there, Chair.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I'll come back on that. Guidance and policy. Yeah, I take your point. If I explain how this works, that might perhaps reassure you. So this has been in place since summer last year, when the council changed its arrangements for procuring agency staff, and agency staff are now procured all through one route, that route being matrix, which gives us, and that's the council's policy that happens. So that gives us management information, centralised management information on a much better scale than it was before. So you're right, we get all that information, and what the guidance does is describe how officers go about procuring an agency worker through the contractual arrangements that we put in place. But it is the policy of the council that those contractual arrangements are used. So the guidance gives officers more detail about how that process works. And that is what the use of consultants policy purported to do as well. It a policy statement. It was more detailed guidance, but it was very out of date detailed guidance. And so the new document supersedes that and sets it out in more detail. You are right in that the management information you describe is now much more widely available since last summer and brings together the arrangements that existed in pockets before. And so what I would say, I think, is that everything is now much more robust. We do have that management information, and the new metric on the figures that I've just given is only available because of this new contract and this new information and bringing these arrangements together. It would otherwise not be available, or I'd be able to give it to you with very little confidence. So I hope that gives you a kind of flavour of the purpose of the guidance stroke policy, and of course I will circulate it.
Chair.
Yeah.
Just to say that the metric itself is reported to this committee. So we've had a report this evening that we've got 64 people who are paid more than £500 a day. I think it would be helpful, Dan, if we could circulate the guidance to the committee to satisfy themselves, because this is something that members really care about, and we need to satisfy ourselves that what's in place meets our needs. But I'd like to thank Councillor Angie for circulating the former consultants policy, because it had fallen into disuse and no one even knew that it existed, which was that long hiatus that we had with no human resources function in the council, really, when people just stopped what was essentially quite good practice. But the key part about that practice in the past is that it was reported to us. And I know that the work that's going on with managers is to make them evaluate every time whether jobs could be, whether there's a real purpose for a fixed term, short term contract, or whether it is in fact a permanent post that's being disguised on the use of a consultant.
Just to say, it was Councillor Bull that circulated it, but I brought it in and drafted it.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Just a question. It's whether the consultancy guidance is actually a policy that should come under this committee, in terms of similarly to these policies that we've just had. Do we need to, or should we be looking at this and formalising it into a policy, or does it just continue to be guidance that isn't necessarily a rubber? Is it under the purview of this committee, I guess?
If I can say, this has been a frustration of mine for some time, actually, because we have policies and then you have management guidance. And when I was a union rep, it was always frustrating because you couldn't get to what was in the management guidance. And I think that since this is so important to members, that it might be, if we could have the document circulated to the committee, that we might then take a view on whether this should be formalised in a simple document that says that we have a consultant policy that we and set the signpost as the guidance.
Thank you.
yeah, I think it's a very good point you made there. There should be really. It's off of the policy. You have the guidance, so there should be a formalized, agreed policy. Then you have that underneath the guidance, which again members should approve if necessary. But we don't, as I said, it's for officers to do that and report back, which is what they've done. But I think that's a very good point.
Okay.
If I might just comment on that point, members, the guidance that I've been mentioning is guidance that's related to the recruitment policy. So there is a policy document, the recruitment policy, which this guidance forms a part of. I mean, it's difficult for you to comment in detail without seeing the document. So I will send the document around and we can perhaps pick it up in the future. But just to reassure you that yeah, this is guidance related to the member agreed recruitment policy.
Once again, Chair, through you, well made. It is a recruitment policy. Within that, it's the subhead use of consultants, guidance, yeah, something like that. Yeah, that's fine.
Is it reflecting the right thing? I suppose if we've got a new guidance, is now the policy that we've got above it, which is the recruitment policy, reflecting the guidance now? I suppose that's the only thing I've asked, but let's have a look.
Yeah, I think once we've had sight of it, we can maybe.
Some clarification. Guidance, it is 100%. you will accept. If the policy, you have to accept it. Am I correct?
Sorry, I'm lost. You were saying,
Guidance
yes,
and policy,
yeah,
there's difference, isn't it?
yes.
Policy means you have to follow it 100%.
Something like that, yes. Yeah, that is the
Guidance,
case.
this is the guidance,
Yeah.
not 100%. You can take it or you go that way.
Indeed, to an extent. So this is how we should do it, ideally, the guidance, but officers, because it's guidance, do not necessarily have to. Yeah, that's a very good point.
The recruitment policy is pretty explicit, but I think it would be useful for us to consider after reading the guidance whether we want something simple to be spelled out separately.
So,
Because I've seen breaches of the policy since we introduced the policy and agreed it here. So it would be useful to have sort of emphasise it.
Clear cut policy better, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, exclusion of press and public, yeah? Is there nobody here?
Nobody's here, but we just have to read out do you want me to read out the exclusion statement? So, item 10 is likely to be subject to a motion or is subject to motion to exclude the press and public from the meeting because it contains exempt information as detailed in section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, paragraph 1, information relating to an individual. The members agree to exclude the press and public. It'll just be a brief pause while we sort that out.
Yeah. New items?
Okay.
Yeah.